listening to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and more. Here's your host, KickedTripod.
Good morning, Overwatch League fans. This is your Overwatch League daily episode for February 21st, 2018. First of all, welcome to Stage 2 of the inaugural season of Overwatch League. Today, I'm joined by Overwatch caster and analyst for Full Circle AVRL. We're going to go ahead and preview some of the big matches this week. But first, the roster shuffle continues. It was reported last week by Jacob Wolf of ESPN that Fissure, a tank, you may not know what team Fissure plays for because, well, he only played 6 maps, actually, in Stage 1. So, but Fissure was a main tank for the London Spitfire, moving to the LA Gladiators. We didn't get official confirmation until just yesterday, where the Spitfire have said that he has officially moved on to the LA Gladiators. They cited some synergy issues as well as Fissure's wanting to play more as the means for the trade. Last but not least, the Overwatch League published a summary of the rules of competition and code of conduct. This is just a summary, but it is 5.5 pages long and documents some of the overarching themes in the code of conduct and rules of competition for Overwatch League. But again, it's very much a summary. However, I do hope that it is the first of many steps to ensure transparency into the league. So let's start with tonight. Seoul Dynasty takes on the LA Valiant. It goes without saying that Seoul definitely didn't finish the stage like really anyone expected. How important is it that Seoul starts out strong in Stage 2, and do you think that they'll perform better in Stage 2?
Seoul need to bounce back convincingly in Stage 2 for sure. I think a lot of people from the start of the season have been quite shocked to eventually see Seoul not qualifying into the Stage 1 playoffs. Whether they would have actually won that or not is another question entirely, but the majority of predictions would have placed them in the top 3 at a minimum regardless. Seoul themselves are currently in the middle of processing the fallout from their early exit in Stage 1-2, and they may be more shocked and disappointed than anyone. They didn't even start losing until more than halfway into the first stage, but it was that loss to LA Valiant that ended up being their toughest and most damaging loss to date. I remember the last time we were here, we're talking about the different playoff scenarios where Seoul were at serious risk of dropping out of the top 3. Those risks would have only been realized, and Houston would have only overtaken Seoul if the Valiant did in fact win. But even then, Seoul would have possibly still been safe if they had at least gotten a good enough map score. The bigger problem here wasn't exactly how badly they lost. In 0-3 with the draw, Seoul didn't even pick up 1 map. That loss ended up having a spillover effect into their next match versus San Francisco as well, where they then needed a 4-0 victory against Shock, and they only managed to get a 3-2. I don't think it's a question of how important it is for Seoul now to win, or whether they can perform better in Stage 2, but rather that it's simply a necessity that they actually do. How important is it? It's extremely important. Do I think they'll perform better in Stage 2? They don't really have a choice. They have to perform better in Stage 2, and it's not even a question. Finishing 5th place behind 2 Western teams was not even in their projected results for Season 1. 2 weeks ago, we talked about whether Western teams had caught up to the Koreans yet. The answer back then was that they were still catching up. The answer right now is that at least 2 have, and they're above Seoul.
So let's talk about the Houston Outlaws. They probably have one of, if not the toughest week going up against the London Spitfire and Boston Uprising. What are the chances that they win one or both of these matches this week?
Houston do have a tough opening, but I'd probably say London have a harder week to start with. It turns out you don't get to be Stage 1 champions without being immediately tested for your position against the other 2 playoffs teams right off the bat. The Houston-London match will be the debut for both teams in Stage 2, and Houston in particular will not want to repeat of their previous Week 1 performance starting out 0-2. Knowing Jake and the mentality of the rest of his team, though, in general based on how they felt across Stage 1, I actually think they'd be quite excited to open with this match. London, on the other hand, will probably feel more pressure coming in as defending champions first off, and also as a team that, and not to take anything away from London, but a team that wasn't even strictly favored to start with, and a team that weren't the favorites to win Stage 1 in the first place, where London lost to both Houston and New York in the final days leading up to the playoffs, with that Houston match in particular being quite a crushing defeat. New York at this point were 9-1 and heavy favorites to take Stage 1. London kind of came out of nowhere, surprising both teams who, understandably, may have felt robbed from what was likely to be a Houston versus New York final, with the NYXL walking away with the trophy in hand in the end. Both teams thought they had the win before they even played the match, and now both teams will have to fight to get their vengeance. What London did prove in that playoffs, though, is that no team who has previously beaten them can feel comfortable about beating them again. Houston will need to come back swinging to win, but on a mental level, at least they know they have done it before, and they should have the belief that they can do it again. Houston versus Boston, though, isn't fully clear, and I think that's at least evidence of the Overwatch League progressing in a healthy direction. Two Western teams with something to prove, both with slow starts and looking for big finishes. The fact that they ended their last match on the final camp of the final map means this one's going to be extremely hard to predict, and you'd likely see this go the distance again. I know both of these teams have been fighting kind of side by side, neck and neck in the competition so far, and Stage 2 is going to define which one comes out on top again. London might technically have a harder week, but I guess that doesn't mean that Houston actually have it easier either. I don't want to be that guy who is indecisive, but I think both of Houston's matches could go either way this week. If I was to give them an edge, I'd say they might have one over London, but with the way Overwatch League is going, they're definitely doing something right when all the matches kind of feel important and they're all difficult to predict.
All right, I'm going to ask you to provide some of that patented AVRL analysis on this one here. On Friday, we have the Stage 1 Grand Finals rematch between NYXL and the London Spitfire. How does NYXL redeem themselves?
As awful as it must have felt to have the Stage 1 title slip through their fingers, I think the NYXL will be able to survive one loss. They've proved beyond doubt that they were overall the best team in Stage 1. They had the most consistent results, with at least 2 players on their roster considered to be the best in their roles. There is a world out there where, instead of Dorado, the playoffs tiebreaker was instead played on Lee Jung, like the rest of the regular season, and in that world, it would have been New York walking away with a 3-2 victory instead of the other way around. Excuses aside, though, being reverse swept is a phenomenon that has only happened 2 other times in Stage 1 across 60 matches. It is very rare to see a team not close out a series when they are that far ahead. I don't think New York are at a position quite yet, though, where they need to be redeeming themselves necessarily. That's a special place in the league reserved for teams like Seoul, who came in with the highest of expectations, only to fall short in stunning fashion on their final dash. New York were 4th to 5th on power rankings before the league started. Coming in 2nd and even being considered the favorite for 1st already exempts them from redemption, I think. That being said, as just previously mentioned, they are going to get that chance to rematch London very quickly, and while I don't think New York are in a position where they have to regain public confidence just yet, beating London the first week certainly does help.
So I think one of the more interesting concepts of Overwatch League is this rotating map pool, where we're going to see different maps every stage. We see them long enough to where we get to see expertise on each of those maps, but we also see them change enough to where that it hopefully doesn't feel stale. I know a lot of people already are getting ready to get their pitchforks ready because they were sick of seeing the Stage 1 maps. But I'm really curious to what you would say about how the map pool will impact these teams' overall power level, if at all.
A new map pool is only going to really affect the team's overall power level if those teams are unprepared to play on those new maps. I don't think inherently, in a vacuum at least, that Overwatch League teams will be incapable of playing on certain maps. The real difference, I think, will be in how teams adjust to meta and balance changes, and then how they then adapt that onto those new maps as well. One map, I think, for better or worse, that has been rotated out, that will have a big impact on the gameplay is Junkertown. This was the only map in Stage 1 where you felt like it was truly anyone's game. No team had full certainty of winning, and that caused both excitement and upset in equal manner. So with Junkertown now going out of the rotation, you might see some more, I guess, consistency with the new map pool coming in being maps that teams are a lot more familiar with that don't have any of the quote-unquote new maps in there. Every map does, however, favor certain compositions and cater to certain strengths. So if you had a good Widowmaker, you were going to be more favored in at least the first point of Junkertown. If you have a good Pharah or a good counter to Pharah, you were going to be more favored on the control maps. When you look at the map pool for Stage 2, I think you'll see a much more polarizing set of maps in terms of how they cater to different strengths than Stage 1. King's Row immediately stands out as a map that's going to favor tank lineups and deathball strategies. If the pro meta moves more towards a tank focus, this is going to be the big map for teams with strong tank lines. You might actually finally start to see real utilization of the big rosters some teams have, where if they've got 3 or 4 tank players, all 3 or all 4 of those tank players might come out all at once. To contrast that, you've also got maps like Hollywood or Watchpoint Gibraltar, which both have heavy emphasis on verticality and high ground control. These are all good maps for mobility, dive, and soldier lineups who can all really take advantage of the height differences. Teams are going to need to be more flexible than ever in all positions, not necessarily just because of the new map pool, and not necessarily just because of meta shifts, but with both combined, that's where teams who are truly versatile will rise out on top.
My thanks to AVRL for joining me on the show today. I always love it when he's on the show. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at I'm AVRL. That's IMAVRL. Tomorrow's guest is going to be AVRL's co-caster and friend Pixie, and we're going to go ahead and review some of tonight's matches. If you like the show, make sure to subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, or your podcast app of choice so you don't miss future episodes. You can also watch or listen to the show at winstonslab.com. Also, make sure to check out our website, overwatchleaguedaily.com. There's links to everything there. And if you have any questions or comments for the show, email me at overwatchleaguedaily@gmail.com. And last but not least, if you like this show, you want to support it, head on over to patreon.com/OWL Daily Show. Thanks again to AVRL for joining me. I'll be back tomorrow with Pixie for another episode of Overwatch League Daily.